The stagecoach wheel cracked against the boulder with a sound like thunder, sending Cordelia Ashworth tumbling across the cramped interior as the driver cursed above. Through the settling dust, she glimpsed a massive figure approaching 7 feet of bronze, muscle, and leather, moving with the fluid grace of a mountain cat despite his imposing size. "Easy there, little sparrow," the giant Apache said, his voice a rumbling bass that seemed to vibrate through the earth itself. His obsidian eyes held surprising gentleness as he extended a hand larger than her entire forearm. "You're bleeding." Cordelia touched her temple, fingers coming away crimson. The driver lay unconscious, and the horses had bolted, leaving her stranded 50 miles from civilization. She'd been traveling to marry Jeremiah Blackstone, a rancher she'd never met, but the crude map in her reticule suggested they'd taken the wrong fork hours ago. "I'm Kiani," the Apache continued, helping her from the wreckage with careful strength. "This is Tohono land, sacred ground. What brings a flower like you to our mountains?" His English was flawless, tinged with an accent she couldn't place. Tattoos covered his massive chest in intricate patterns, and his long black hair was braided with silver beads that caught the fading sunlight. Despite her Eastern upbringing's warnings about savages, Cordelia felt no fear, only a strange electric awareness of his proximity. "I'm to be married," she managed, then immediately wondered why she felt compelled to explain herself to this stranger, to a rancher named Blackstone. Something dangerous flickered in Kiani's eyes. "Blackstone's dead, little sparrow. Died 3 weeks past of the fever. His foreman's been keeping it quiet, hoping to steal the land." The words hit her like a physical blow. She'd sold everything, her father's bookshop, her mother's jewelry, her childhood home to pay for passage west and a wedding dress now torn and bloodied. She had $17 to her name and nowhere to go. "The spirits work in mysterious ways," Kiani murmured, studying her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Perhaps you weren't sent to the wrong place after all." He lifted her onto his painted stallion as if she weighed nothing, then swung up behind her. The horse moved like liquid beneath them as they rode toward a hidden canyon where smoke rose from cooking fires. Cordelia should have been terrified, a proper Boston lady alone with a giant Indian warrior, but instead she found herself leaning back against his broad chest, feeling safer than she had in months. "My grandmother will want to meet you," Kiani said near her ear, his breath warm against her neck. "She's been having dreams about a pale woman with hair like autumn leaves who would bring great change to our people." "I'm nobody special," Cordelia protested, but even as she spoke the words, she felt their falsehood. Something momentous was happening here, something that had nothing to do with her. Failed engagement and everything to do with the way this magnificent man's arms felt around her. "God finally sent you to us," Kiala whispered, and Cordelia's heart stuttered at the reverence. The Apache village materialized from the canyon walls like something from a dream, hidden dwellings carved into the red rock face and camouflaged so perfectly that Cordelia gasped in wonder. Children peeked out from behind their mother's skirts, their dark eyes wide with curiosity at her pale skin and copper-colored hair. An ancient woman emerged from the largest cave dwelling, her face a map of deep lines and her silver hair braided with turquoise and bones. Despite her age, she moved with regal dignity, and when her clouded eyes fixed on Cordelia, the old woman's entire body went rigid with shock. "Itzel," she breathed, using what Cordelia would later learn was the Apache word for rainbow. "You have brought her, my grandson." Kiani helped Cordelia down with gentle hands, but his grandmother, Ayana, the others called her, approached with the intensity of a desert storm. She reached up to touch Cordelia's face with gnarled fingers, speaking rapidly in Apache before switching to English. "For 3 moons I have dreamed of you, pale daughter. You come when the old ways die and the new world threatens to swallow us whole. Ayana's voice carried the weight of prophecy. The spirits whispered that salvation would come with hair like flame and eyes like mountain lakes. Cordelia felt heat rise in her cheeks, overwhelmed by the attention and the mystical weight everyone seemed to be placing on her arrival. I think there's been a mistake. I'm just a shopkeeper's daughter from Boston. I came west to marry a rancher. Nothing more. The wind doesn't make mistakes, Ayana said firmly, nor does my grandson's heart. She shot a knowing look at Kiani, whose jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Tell me, Flamehair, what skills do you possess? The question seemed odd, but Cordelia answered honestly. I can read and write in 4 languages. I kept my father's books for 15 years and taught Sunday school to the children in our parish. I know herbs for healing. My mother was skilled in such things before she died. A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd. Ayana's eyes gleamed with something that looked suspiciously like satisfaction. The government men come tomorrow with papers demanding our children for their boarding schools. They would steal our young ones and fill their minds with alien thoughts, forbidding them to speak our tongue or practice our ways. Kiani's massive hands clenched into fists. They want to destroy us from within, grandmother. Take our children and make them strangers to their own people. But they cannot argue with a white woman who speaks their language and knows their laws. Ayana continued, her gaze never leaving Cordelia's face. Especially one who could teach our children to read and write in the white man's tongue while keeping our traditions alive in their hearts. Understanding dawned on Cordelia like sunrise over the canyon. You want me to stay, to teach. I want you to become one of us, the old woman said bluntly. To take our ways as your own and help us navigate this new world without losing our souls. But the choice must be yours, Flamehair. We are not a people who force such decisions. Cordelia's mind reeled. Stay in this hidden canyon with these proud, fierce people? Learn their ways, teach their children, help them preserve their culture against government interference? It was madness, and yet, standing in this secret place with Kiani's dark eyes burning into her soul, it felt like the first truly right thing that had ever happened to her. There would be conditions, she said carefully, and Ayana smiled, showing she had expected this pragmatism. Speak them. I keep my Christian faith, though I'll respect your beliefs. I teach English and arithmetic, but also Apache history and traditions, and she glanced at Kiani, her cheeks burning. I choose my own path in matters of the heart. Agreed, Ayana said without hesitation, though Kiani's eyes flashed with something unreadable. Welcome home, daughter of 2 worlds. 3 weeks later, Cordelia knelt beside a stream, grinding corn with the other women while children played in the shallows. Her hands, once soft from a genteel life, now bore calluses from honest work, and her pale skin had bronzed under the desert sun. She traded her torn traveling dress for buckskin clothing that moved like water, and her hair hung in a single braid adorned with small blue stones the women had given her. You're becoming one of us, said Paloma, a young mother whose daughter had taken to following Cordelia everywhere. But your heart remains divided. Cordelia's hands stilled on the grinding stone. It was true every day she felt herself changing, becoming something new and strange and wonderful. The Apache ways spoke to a wildness she'd never known existed within her proper Boston soul. But it was Kiani who truly unsettled her. The giant warrior treated her with unfailing courtesy, but she caught him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. When he'd taught her to ride Apache style, his large hands steadying her as she learned to guide the horse with subtle shifts of weight, the contact had sent fire racing through her veins. When he'd showed her the ancient petroglyphs in the hidden chambers of the canyon, his deep voice weaving stories of his ancestors, she'd found herself leaning closer, drawn by something far deeper than mere attraction. He has not taken a wife, Paloma continued, her tone carefully neutral. Many have hoped, but his heart has remained his own. Why are you telling me this? Because he watches you as a man watches the sunrise, as if you bring light to his world. And you watch him the same way, though you try to hide it. Heat flamed in Cordelia's cheeks. Was she so transparent? It would be impossible. I'm white. He's Apache. The world would never accept such a union. The world beyond these canyon walls, perhaps. But here, we make our own rules. Paloma's voice grew serious. My grandmother lived through the time when our people were hunted like animals, when soldiers came with guns and hatred. She learned that love is too precious to waste on what others might think. That evening, as Cordelia taught reading lessons, by firelight to a circle of eager children, she felt Kiani's presence before she saw him. He emerged from the shadows like something conjured from her dreams, his massive frame silhouetted against the dancing flames. The children learned quickly. Under your guidance, he said when the lesson ended and the young ones had scattered to their families. It was chaos and beauty and hope all mixed together, a living testament to what the world could become when people chose love over fear, understanding over hatred, and the courage to build something new over the safety of clinging to old prejudices. Ready? To make it official in the eyes of your God as well as mine? Kiani asked. I've been ready since the moment you caught me falling from that stagecoach. Cordelia replied and meant it with every fiber of her being. Hand in hand, they walked down to join their wedding guests, their footsteps echoing off canyon walls. That had witnessed the end of one story and the glorious beginning of another. Behind them, the sun climbed higher into an endless sky, blessing their union with light that would shine for generations to come. They're bright and eager. It's a privilege to teach them. She began gathering the slate boards and chalk sticks she'd fashioned from local materials. Though I worry about what will happen when government officials come to inspect. They came. Today, Kiani said quietly, and Cordelia's head snapped up in alarm. While you were with the women at the stream. They left satisfied that our children are receiving proper education from a qualified white teacher. You didn't tell me they were coming. I wanted you to continue naturally, without fear coloring your actions. He moved closer, his dark eyes serious. They asked about you, your background, your intentions. I told them you were a missionary sent by your church to educate Indian children. The lie sat strangely between them, another reminder of the impossible complexity of her situation. And what happens when they discover the truth? What truth? Kiani's voice dropped to a rumble that seemed to resonate in her bones. That. You've chosen to make this place your home? That you found something here worth staying for? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Cordelia set down the last slate board and turned to face him fully, her heart hammering against her. Ribs. In the firelight, he looked like some ancient god of war and storms, beautiful and terrifying and utterly compelling. Have I? She whispered. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face with fingers that trembled despite their size and strength. That's what I hope to discover, little sparrow. The attack came at dawn, when mist still clung to the canyon walls and most of the village slept. Cordelia woke to Kiani's urgent hand on her shoulder and the sound of gunfire echoing off the red stone cliffs. Riders, he said tersely, already reaching for his weapons. 20 men, maybe more. They're not government officials. Through her dwelling's entrance, Cordelia saw smoke rising from the lower reaches of the canyon. Women were gathering children and elders, moving them toward the hidden chambers deeper in the rock face. The calm efficiency of their response spoke of too much practice with such emergencies. Who are they? She asked, pulling on her boots with shaking hands. Blackstone's men, most likely. Word must have spread that his intended bride disappeared in Apache territory. Kiani's face was grim as he checked his rifle. They'll use it as an excuse to attack, claim they're rescuing you from savages. The irony was bitter. The very men who might have cheated her were now using her supposed kidnapping to justify violence against the people who'd shown her nothing but kindness. I have to go to them. Tell them I chose to stay. They won't listen, Kiani said flatly. And they won't let you leave alive once they realize you know their secrets about Blackstone's death. More gunfire erupted, closer now. Through the growing smoke, Cordelia could see muzzle flashes from the canyon entrance where Apache warriors had taken defensive positions. The attackers had numbers, but the Apache knew every stone and shadow of their home. Take me to Ayana, Cordelia said suddenly. If this is about me, then I need to do something. Kiani's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Together they made their way through passages carved deep into the living rock, emerging in the sacred chamber where the old woman waited with the other elders. Her clouded eyes found Cordelia immediately. The flame hair brings trouble, as I knew she would, Ayana said, but there was no accusation in her voice, only acceptance of fate's design. What would you have us do, daughter? Let me go to them, Cordelia said. Let me try to end this without more bloodshed. They will kill you, Kiani growled, his massive frame radiating barely controlled violence. The moment they see you've chosen Apache ways over their civilization. Maybe, but if I don't try, more of your people will die defending me. Cordelia reached for his hand, her smaller fingers intertwining with his. The touch sent electricity up her arm, but she forced herself to focus on his eyes. I won't let that happen. There is another way, Ayana said quietly. All eyes turned to the ancient woman who was studying Cordelia with unreadable intensity. The old ceremonies, the binding of souls. It would make you truly one of us beyond any white man's law or custom to reclaim. Cordelia's breath caught. She understood immediately marriage, Apache style, performed according to traditions older than European settlement of the continent. It would be a protection of sorts, a declaration that could not be easily dismissed. Grandmother, Kiani's voice carried warning. She should not be forced into such a choice by violence. I'm not being forced, Cordelia said softly, surprised by the certainty in her own voice. I've known for weeks that my heart belongs here. The question is whether yours does too. For a moment that stretched like eternity, Kiani stared down at her. The sounds of battle grew closer, echoing through the stone passages. Then, without warning, he cupped her face in his enormous hands and kissed her with a desperation that spoke of months of restraint finally broken. My heart has been yours since the moment I saw you fall from that stagecoach, he said against her lips. But are you certain, little sparrow? Once we take this step, there can be no going back to your old world. Then it's fortunate I have no desire to return to it, Cordelia replied, and meant every word. Ihana smiled, her weathered face transforming with joy. Then let us make you Apache in truth, before the sun sets on this day of fire. The ceremony took place in the heart of the mountain, in a chamber lit by torches and filled with the smoke of burning sage. Despite the battle raging outside, the Apache elders had gathered to witness something that transcended the immediate danger. The joining of two souls across the vast divide of culture and blood. Cordelia knelt on a blanket woven with symbols. She was only beginning to understand, wearing a dress of softest doeskin painted with sacred designs. Turquoise and silver adorned her throat and wrists, gifts from the women of the tribe who had welcomed her as a sister. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, the way Apache brides wore it, crowned with a circlet of eagle feathers that marked her as worthy of a great warrior's love. Kiani faced her across a small fire, magnificent in his ceremonial garments. His massive chest was painted with symbols of protection and fertility, his hair braided with beads that told the story of his victories in battle and his standing among his people. but it was his eyes that held her dark as midnight, burning, with an emotion so intense it made her tremble. In the old tongue, Ayana began, her voice carrying the weight of countless generations. We speak of souls that are split at birth, each half wandering the world until they find their completion. Tonight, we witness such a reunion. The old woman lifted a bundle of sweetgrass, lighting it from the sacred fire and letting the fragrant smoke wash over the couple. Kiani of the Tohono people, grandson of my blood, do you take this woman not as possession but as equal? Will you honor her mind, cherish her strength, and walk beside her through all the seasons of life? I will, Kiani replied, his voice steady despite the emotion Cordelia could read in his face. She is the other half of my spirit, the song that makes my heart complete. Cordelia of the far places, daughter of my choosing. Ayana turned to her. Do you accept the ways of our people as your own? Will you stand with us against all enemies, share our joys and sorrows, and raise your children to know the wisdom of two worlds? I will, Cordelia whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. The words felt like a key turning in a lock, opening a door she'd never known existed within her own soul. The old woman smiled and lifted a pottery bowl filled with spring water mixed with red clay from the sacred places. Then drink together and let your spirits join as your bodies will join, as your futures will join until the last star falls from the sky. They shared the bowl, the earthy taste symbolic of their bond to the land and to each other. Then Kiani reached for her hands, his calloused palms engulfing her smaller ones with infinite tenderness. In my language, he said softly, I am Kiani, which means the one who teaches, but from you, little sparrow, I have learned what it means to love so deeply that another person's happiness becomes more precious than your own breath. Cordelia felt her heart swell until she thought it might burst from her chest. In my language, I am Cordelia, which means daughter of the sea. But you have shown me that home isn't a place, it's wherever your beloved heart beats beside yours. They tied their wrists together with braided cord while the elders chanted prayers in the ancient tongue. The sounds of battle seemed to fade away, replaced by something timeless and sacred that filled the chamber with power. When they kissed as husband and wife, sealing their union, Cordelia felt something fundamental shift within her, as if she'd finally become the person she was always meant to be. But their moment of peace was shattered when a young warrior burst into the chamber, his face grim with news. The white men have broken through the outer defenses. They're demanding to speak with their missing woman, threatening to burn the entire village if she isn't produced. Kiani rose in one fluid motion, his hand moving to his weapons. How many? Have we lost? 3 wounded, none dead yet. But they're getting desperate. Their leader is screaming about savage kidnappers and stolen property. Cordelia stood as well, her new husband's protective instincts warring with her own determination to end the violence. I have to face them, as your wife now rather than their victim. They need to understand that I chose this life freely. And if they refuse to listen, then we make them listen, she said firmly, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. Together, they emerged from the hidden passages hand in hand, Kiani's massive presence beside her like a mountain made flesh. The battle had moved into the main area of the village, where overturned cooking pots and scattered belongings told the story of families forced to flee in haste. Smoke hung heavy in the air, acrid and choking, while the crack of rifle fire echoed. Off the canyon walls dotted the village's heart, where the sacred fire usually burned, 20 mounted men had formed a rough circle. Their leader was a weasel-faced man with pale eyes and a thin mustache, wearing the kind of cheap suit that marked him as someone trying to appear more important than he was. This had to be Jeremiah Blackstone's foreman, the one who'd hidden his employer's death to steal the land. There, he shouted, pointing directly at Cordelia. "There's our missing bride. See how they've painted her up like one of their squaws." The men raised their rifles, but Cordelia stepped forward before they could fire, her voice carrying clearly across the open space. "I am not missing, Mr. Garrett. I am exactly where I choose to be." A murmur ran through the mounted men. Several lowered their weapons slightly, confused by her calm demeanor and obvious lack of distress. But Garrett's face flushed an ugly red as he realized his careful plans were unraveling. "They've bewitched you," he snarled. "Filled your head with their heathen nonsense. But don't worry, miss, we'll have you back to civilization and properly. Married before you can say another word. Married to whom?" Cordelia asked sweetly. "Surely not to Mr. Blackstone, since he died of fever 3 weeks ago, a death you've been concealing to steal his property." The silence that followed was profound. Even the Apache warriors, positioned at strategic points around the canyon, seemed to hold their breath. Garrett's face went from red to white in the space of a heartbeat. "You don't know what you're talking about," he blustered, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Don't I?" Cordelia smiled, feeling the power of truth on her side. "I know you've been forging his signature on land deals. I know you've been selling his cattle and pocketing the profits. And I know you brought these men here not to rescue me, but to silence the only witness to your crimes." One of the mounted men older than the others, with the bearing of a former soldier, spoke up. "Is this true, Garrett? Is Blackstone really dead? She's lying." Garrett's voice cracked with desperation. "They've turned her against her own kind. Look at her dressed like a savage, standing with that giant buck like she's, like they single quotes married," Cordelia finished calmly. "Yes, we are. By Apache law and by my own free choice." The word hit the assembled men like a physical blow. Several spurred their horses backward, as if proximity to such an unthinkable union might somehow contaminate them. But the older man, Captain Morrison, she heard someone call him, studied her with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're saying you chose this, miss? Freely and without coercion?" "I'm saying I found something here worth more than all the gold in California," she replied, moving closer to Kiani until his arm slipped around her waist. "I found a people who valued my mind as well as my heart. I found a purpose greater than simply keeping house for a stranger. And I found a love deeper than anything I ever imagined possible." Morrison nodded slowly, then turned to Garrett with contempt in his weathered features. "We came here under false pretenses, boys. This lady isn't a captive, and I suspect young Garrett here has been feeding us a pack of lies from the start. You can't believe her." Garrett's voice rose to a near shriek. "She's been corrupted by these savages. We have to save her from herself." "The only person who needs saving," came a new voice from the canyon entrance, "is you, Mr. Garrett." All heads turned to see a man in a federal marshal's badge riding into the village, followed by a small troop of cavalry soldiers. Marshal Williams was a legend in this territory, a man who enforced the law without regard for color or creed, and who'd earned the respect of both whites and Indians through his scrupulous fairness. "Marshal Williams," Morrison said with obvious relief. "What brings you to this godforsaken place?" "Reports of fraud involving the Blackstone Ranch," Williams replied, his steady gaze fixed on Garrett. "Seems someone's been conducting illegal business using a dead man's name. We have warrants." Garrett made a desperate grab for his gun, but Kiani moved faster than should have been possible for a man his size. One massive hand closed around the foreman's wrist with a sound like breaking twigs, while the other plucked the weapon away, as if disarming a child. "I believe," the Giant Apache said mildly, "my wife asked you to listen." 6 months later, Cordelia stood at the edge of the canyon watching the sunrise paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Her second wedding dress, this one white silk ordered, especially from San Francisco, rustled in the morning breeze as she adjusted the Apache jewelry that had become as much a part of her as breathing. Today they would hold a Christian ceremony to complement their Apache union, not because either of them doubted the validity of their first wedding, but because Cordelia had wanted to honor both sides of her heritage. The small wooden church they'd built at the canyon's mouth would host not just Apache families, but also the growing number of white settlers who'd come to respect and trade with Kiani's people. Having second thoughts, Mrs. Many Hearts? Her husband asked, using the name the tribe had given her after she'd learned to speak their language fluently. She turned to face him, marveling as always at the way her pulse quickened at the sight of his magnificent frame. He wore a black suit tailored to accommodate his massive shoulders, but he'd refused to cut his hair or remove his silver earrings, a compromise between worlds that somehow worked perfectly. Never, she said firmly, reaching up to straighten his tie, though I still can't believe Marshall Williams agreed to officiate. He said any woman brave enough to marry me deserves whatever ceremonies she wants. Kiani rumbled with amusement. Besides, he's grown fond of our little experiment in civilization. Their experiment had indeed proved successful beyond anyone's expectations. The school Cordelia had established now taught children from 3 different tribes, plus the offspring of white traders and Mexican settlers who discovered the benefits of peaceful coexistence. The Apache had begun selling their beautiful silverwork and pottery to Eastern markets, while also serving as guides for scientific expeditions studying the unique geology and plant life of the region. Most importantly, the children were growing up bilingual and bicultural, comfortable in both worlds and capable of bridging the gap between them. It was exactly the future Ayanna had envisioned in her prophetic dreams. The government inspector will be here next month, Cordelia said, voicing the concern that had been weighing on her mind. Let him come, Kiani replied with quiet confidence. He'll find a thriving community where children learn reading and mathematics alongside respect for the land and the old ways. He'll find families prospering through honest trade rather than depending on government rations. And he'll find a white woman who chose to become Apache, not because she was captured or coerced, but because she recognized wisdom when she saw it. Cordelia smiled, her hand moving instinctively to the slight swell of her belly where their first child grew. The baby would be born into a world where different cultures could blend and strengthen each other, where love could transcend the arbitrary divisions of race and tradition. Grandmother's latest dream was about our daughter, she said softly. Oh? Kiani's eyes lit with interest. Ayanna's visions had proved remarkably accurate over the years. She sees her as a bridge builder like her mother, but also a warrior like her father. Grandmother says she'll help negotiate the treaty that finally brings lasting peace to this territory. And what do you see when you dream of our daughter? Cordelia considered the question, her gaze drifting back to the painted canyon where Apache children played alongside white and Mexican youngsters, their laughter echoing off ancient stone. I see hope, she said finally. I see proof that God's greatest miracles often come disguised as the most impossible situations. Kiana pulled her close, his massive arms enveloping her with infinite tenderness. Speaking of miracles, he murmured against her hair, have I mentioned lately that I love you, little sparrow? Only every day, she laughed, but her heart still fluttered at the words, though I'll never tire of hearing it. Below them, the wedding guests began gathering in the little church, Apache warriors in their finest regalia standing beside cavalry. Officers in dress uniform, Mexican traders sharing jokes with white settlers, children of a dozen different backgrounds, chasing each other through the pews with absolute disregard for the color of each other's skin.